We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe.
Well, good morning, everyone. This is John Craig, and you are with us on Let Us Reason Together. And I sure appreciate y'all joining us this morning. We've got some great things that we want to talk about today. We've got not only the Torah portion and the Brit Hadashah, but I have some information that we need to discuss that is taking place in our world today, and you want to stay tuned for that. There's some interesting things. We must not be left unaware. So, what is Let Us Reason Together about? It is about Isaiah 118. Come now and let us reason together. It says, Yahweh, though your sins are as scarlet, they will be as white as snow. Though they are red like crimson, they will be like wool. And this is where we sit down, reason out current events, cultural shifts, and of course this week's Torah portion. And we can either push back or push through. Nevertheless, if iron does not sharpen iron, sparks will never fly, let alone ever get a fire going. And with a little heat and a good midrash, how will our hearts ever get soft and moldable enough to be transformed in the way that the Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, wants us to be, and have a little fun along the way? It is Monday, December the 9th, 2019. It is the 11th day of the 9th month of the Hebrew year 5780. Some people call that month Kislev. And this is where we want you to join in with us, interact with us in the chat room. We would love to hear from you, hear from your comments, get your input on some of the things that we're talking about as well. You can watch us on YouTube. You can catch us on Facebook and here on the Messianic Lamb Network. You can, as always, just connect directly to the website and catch our live shows. If you miss our live shows, it's always on the archives, and you go back and watch some of our prior events as well, the different things that we've talked about in the past. Some of them are, well, a lot of them are timeless. So just make sure you stay tuned with that. Also, what do we got going on today? Well, we have some weird and quirky celebrations today. But before I let you know what some of those weird and quirky celebrations are, I want to bring into our mix my co-host, joining me from the great state of North Carolina. I want to bring in, I want my money back. Yes. Hi, I want my money back. Good morning. How are you today?
I'm good. I want my money back.
You okay? All right. And I'm sorry that the money disappeared.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's amazing how money disappears in this world. It's never like, where did it go? I had it in my bank account and I bought gas, and then where did it go?
Where did it go? That's my next name is where did it go?
Yeah. All right. Also joining me from the great nation of the white north at this time of year, Canada, Mr. Darryl Weinberg, or Rabbi Darryl Weinberg. Good morning, Darryl.
Good morning. Good to be here.
I'm glad that you are here. Is it the great white north today?
Oh yeah, it's white out there.
It's white. I've heard that some places are getting like tons of snow. Are you like buried, or is it? How much do you guys know out there?
We did get about 4 or 5 inches. I guess it was on Friday morning, but that's normal. We were down in Niagara Falls yesterday. There wasn't a drop of it down there.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, it's all melted by there already. But up here, because we are about 40 miles north of Toronto.
Okay.
It makes a huge difference because we don't have the lake effect up here.
Yeah. Okay. That lake effect.
Darryl, the way we say it here in North Carolina is "tweren't a drop."
Tweren't a drop?
Twernt a drop.
Twernt a
Twernt
drop.
to drop. Nope.
Okay.
Twernt to drop yesterday where we were.
There
where
you
we
go.
was.
I'm trying to get everybody acclimated in how to talk North Carolinian, because everybody is going to be coming here, and Lamb Radio it'll just be broadcast straight from the studio instead of everybody's homes. So we got a background that all looks the same. That's the only reason I'm getting everybody to move here to North Carolina, is so that the background will all look the same.
Oh, okay. That's it. Hey, if my family moved to North Carolina, there where you're at in the Wilmington area, do you realize that would be returning to our roots in this nation? Because
Really?
because because of my Scottish background, that many of the Scots landed in Wilmington, North Carolina. That's where the Craig clan came into the United States.
You're
Just right where you're at. That would be like full circle for us.
You're supposed to be here.
Yeah.
Yep. And Darryl, he's fixing to move too, and all packed up, and we should actually see pictures of that, but that would be nice, Darryl. Take
There's
pictures.
nothing packed yet, but it's going to start today.
Oh.
We just confirmed where we're going yesterday, so
that's awesome.
it's on now.
Wow.
North Carolina.
Things start happening really fast, right? Just boom, boom, boom. That's awesome. Hey, so some weird and quirky celebrations for today. And so just so you know, you don't have to participate, but because Darryl, you got your hands full making a move. And Mark's like, I don't know if I want this, but it's no haste day. No haste day.
No
but
haste.
Yeah. Haste makes waste. No, how's it? Waste
makes waste.
Haste makes waste. So no haste day. Anyway,
speaking of waste, aren't we missing somebody in?
We are. Yes, my beloved Miss Sandi Craig. She's usually sitting right here with me. She is in preparation to get out of the house and down to
Wilmington, North Carolina.
Well, to Plainview today, so that she can make preps, get everything ready to go for her mom, as her mom is scheduled, unless y'all intervenes, her mom is scheduled for this surgery tomorrow. So she's going down there because her mother is going to have this. If you don't know, what's happened is her stomach there's like a 5-inch hole it's a hiatal hernia. And anyway, it's a 5-inch hole. Her stomach has moved up, and it's actually moved up into her chest behind her heart. And they're going to take that and put it back down and sew up that hole. And it's a pretty big deal. And they're thinking maybe they can do it laparoscopically. And if not, they've got to open her up and make the movements and put things back into place. And kind of crazy. Please be praying for Twyla as she goes through that, unless y'all intervenes and does a creative miracle between now and then. So talking about that, Mysterious Women's Soul Day. Have you ever heard of that day? It's a weird and quirky celebration. Mysterious Women's Soul Day. Okay, so it's just us guys. Can we ever figure out a woman's mind, will, and emotion? Or do we dare say anything?
I would say that's every day. It's not just today. I think it's every day.
Sandy and I have been married 25 years, and and I am still learning the mysteries of the woman's soul. Every day is like, where did that come from? I didn't see that coming. So, all right. I'm not going to say anything else. It's anti-boredom and anti-cold day. So anti-boredom and anti-cold day. So make the most of it. Do not get bored today. You won't get bored if you're listening to Let Us Reason Together, or you're catching on the archive during this 24-hour period. Just so you know, you're not allowed to be bored today. And Darryl, no cold. All right. No, you can't be cold up there. Just
Okay,
saying.
I'll get right on that.
We're going to the beach today, so you can't be bored at the beach, and it's not cold at the beach. So,
Are you going to surf?
not today. My boogie board is out of commission.
Oh, okay. How about this? It's International Anti-Corruption Day. Yeah.
Nobody's showing up for that one.
as the impeachment goes full board in the House of Representatives, they forgot to look at the calendar. All right.
They were going to have this big celebration and expecting millions of people, and nobody shows up.
No one's showing up in the mall at Washington, D.C. for that one. How about this? And guess what? They forgot their Bibles because it's Spiritual Literacy Day. Maybe we can overnight some Bibles to the Congress. Maybe they should read the Torah portion and maybe figure out some things.
Now, Nancy Pelosi will just say you've got to pass it so you can figure out what's in it.
That's right. Well, and as she has said, I pray for the president every day.
She prays about the president every day. Maybe not for the president.
Pray with an A or with an E?
Right? It's witchcraft prayers, in my opinion. That's just me saying.
Hey, yeah, just saying.
Just saying. because it's certainly not about righteousness in my thoughts. All right, okay, but it is Spiritual Literacy Month, and maybe just maybe they would read a great book I know of. How about this? And one other thing, it's very important as we are in the winter season, and also in what's in the holiday season here in around the world. It's Seasonal Depression Awareness Month. Seasonal Depression Awareness Month. You know, one of the biggest ways to combat depression? Vitamin D. Vitamin D. We lack vitamin D in the wintertime, and our body needs that. And that our brain needs and our emotions need vitamin D. Couple vitamin D3 with K2 so that they work synergistically together, and it'll break the chemistry that causes seasonal depression. And since we don't get enough sunshine. All right, just some thoughts. How about this? Positive quote of the day. Okay, we still have a couple minutes left here to go on this. Positive quote of the day. Winston Churchill. Remember that guy? So think about Winston Churchill. Big old cigar. He said this: success consists of going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. How about that? Yeah. He also said it this way. It's also been quoted as courage is going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm, or losing without losing enthusiasm. So yeah, just something to ponder. How about funny quote of the day? This is when you're supposed to laugh. I didn't get Sandy's. Ha. Okay. But so I'll have to do it for her. This is from Lily Tomlin. I always wanted to be somebody, but now I realize I should have been more specific. I always wanted to be something, but now I realize I should have been even more specific.
That works.
Yeah. Okay. And left quote of the day from James M. Barry. The praise that comes from love does not make us vain, but more humble. Or in Texas, you say more humble.
Humble.
Yep.
Yeah. We'd say humble.
All right,
hey,
Darryl, I had to say that for you. Just
hey, John, real quick, I have a picture that Darryl sent me of their vehicle all ready to go, packed up, and what they're going to do and everything here. So, thought maybe I would share that with everybody. This is what Darryl and the family is going to use to travel down the road. So, and
you've got American flags. Now that's really cool, Darryl.
That's because he's coming to North Carolina.
That way you can cross the border that much easier, right? put American flags in your car. Sounds kind of cold though.
Yeah, you don't need a passport if you got an American flag.
There you go. That's right. Just wave the flag. Just wave the
That's
flag.
right.
Just like Nadler in the impeachment hearings last week. I had to wear the red, white, and blue flag because he was so patriotic and saving America. Just saying. Okay. Verse of the day. I have two verses for the day because they go together. I'm matching two verses because in the half Torah portion we have Obadiah and we have Hosea, and I'm putting two verses that, yes, I cherry picked them. I'm just giving my caveat. I cherry picked them, put them together, but they go together. All right. Obadiah 1:15. For the day of the Lord draws near on all the nations. As you have done, it will be done to you. Your dealings will return on your own head. Now combine that with Hosea 12:6. Therefore, return to your God, observe kindness and justice, and wait for your God continually. Yeah, there you go. I like the way those fit together. Are they taken out of context? They don't read together. Yes, they are taken out of context. But I like the flow because honestly, it is the truth. We all need to return to the truth. To Teshuvah. That's what I'm thinking. And what happened on this day in history? Yes. Do you remember this day? Think about this. What happened? Where were you when this happened on this day in history on December the 9th, 2019? Yeah. So think about where you are right now because the World Anti-Doping Agency bans Russia from all major sporting events, including the 2020 Tokyo Olympics and the 2022 Football World Cup in Qatar for manipulating laboratory data, or as in some countries say, laboratory data. Yeah. On this day, Russia has been banned from the Olympics and the World Cup.
Really?
Yeah.
Well,
that actually made what happened on this day in history on today's list.
Darryl is very upset about this.
Yeah.
I don't understand, but I mean, it's terrible. It is a terrible, terrible thing, but I just can't imagine how upset Darryl is about all this.
About Russia being banned? Yeah, that's really messed up my feng shui today.
Yeah, man. You know, Russia is the boogeyman. That's all I can say. The boogeyman is struck down again.
I've heard them called worse names than that.
Okay, one last thing. So on the lighter side of things, before we jump into the Torah portion, you want to stay tuned for the Torah portion and the news portion and the Brit Hadashah as we move forward on this day's broadcast of Let Us Reason Together. And so on the lighter side of things, this is a true story. It's about a parrot at an auction. Okay, so ponder this. One day, David went to an auction. This is a true story. While he was there, he bid for a parrot. David really wanted this bird, so he got caught up and thoroughly involved in the bidding. He kept on bidding, but kept getting outbid. So he bid higher and higher and higher. Finally, after he had bid much more than he had intended, David won the bid. The parrot was his at last. And he was paying for the parrot. He said to the auctioneer, I hope this parrot can talk. I would hate to have paid this much for it, only to find out that he can't talk. Don't worry, said the auctioneer. He can talk. Who do you think kept bidding against you?
Parrot jokes are the best.
It's a true story.
Parrot jokes are the best. They really are. I've heard there are a million of them out there, and I love it. That reminds me of how Darryl started off his sermon last Sabbath, brother. That little scenario that you said about. How do you find out whether or not somebody is? I don't know. Say it. You know, you got it, John. You didn't hear last Sabbath. Obviously, John has his own service, but you've got to tell that little deal. It was hard for me to go on with the rest of your teaching because it was so good. But and let me remind everybody, it is up to watch his video, his whole thing. He's doing a video series on Jezebel. It is on the website. You can go and hear this. This is, by the way, that teaching last Sabbath was one of the best teachings I've heard across the board in my 26 years of being Messianic. It was by far one of the best teachings, and every single person should hear this. But tell us that scenario at the beginning. It was so good. So good.
Well, a man goes to a mental institution, and he's talking with the director about how they determine whether someone needs to be institutionalized. And the director says it's very simple. We have a bathtub that's full of water, and then we give them a bucket, we give them a cup, and we give them a teaspoon, and we tell them to empty it. And the guy says, "Oh, I understand. So, a sane person would use a bucket as opposed to a cup or a teaspoon." And the director says, "No, a sane person would actually unplug it and let the water drain out. Do you want a bed by the window?"
It's still good every time. It's
my favorite one of those was that insanity doesn't run in my family. It strolls through, getting to know everybody personally.
I love it. I
told that last night to someone in Niagara Falls, and they howled.
That's funny.
It is. It's so good. So good. Anyway, it's very good.
All right. Well, hey, let's segment over to the Torah portion, and let's hear what you got for us today.
Okie dokie. Well, this is such a neat section, and I think one of the most heartwarming stories in the scriptures. So we talked about last week Jacob going to Laban and spending the next 21 years there, and God's really refining him. And on the way back, he wrestles with God. And starting off of this week's Torah portion, and what is the Torah portion this week? What's the name of it? It is
the Shelach.
Vayeshlach.
Yeah. Shelach, yeah. So you've got the wrestling with God, and Jacob is fighting against him, and finally, and it says he prevails. Like it appears that the angel of the Lord can't win against Jacob, and so it says that he put out his hip, and now Jacob goes from wrestling with God to clinging on to him. I think that is an amazing picture of how God deals with us, that we fight him a lot. Or maybe that's just me, I don't know. But we wrestle with God all the time, and God is pushing us. And I can even use just the whole experience of what happened in Niagara Falls, because I told God that before I go down, I got to have a whole bunch of things straightened out. And God says, no, that's not the way it's going to be. And he closed every other door. And I kept saying no to this, but God said, no, this is the way it's going to happen. And finally, he put us in a position where I had to say, well, this is obviously the way the Lord wants it to happen. And whatever desires I had are irrelevant. And so instead of wrestling with him, I just said, okay, if this is the way it's going to be, the way it's going to be. You've got a plan in all this. And I've learned to do that a lot quicker over the years than I used to. So, but Jacob, I mean, he's wrestling with God, and then God finally puts out his hip, and now he's lame. It says he limped for the rest of his life. And Jacob goes from wrestling and fighting with God to clinging on to him, and says, I will not let you go until you bless me. And what a picture of the way our relationship with God works. Because on Shabbat service, when I read the Torah portion, I talked about how Jacob made all these conditions before God would be his God, and God had to do this, and God had to do that, and then God will be my God, and then I'll give him 10%. And yet God's promise to him was unconditional. However, that unconditional promise involved preparing him to receive the promise. And I think God's got a promise for each and every one of us. He's got a mission. He's got a destiny for each and every one of us. But we're not ready for it. And so we have to go through this whole process in order that God refine us and prepare us and discipline us and train us and mold us into the person that he wants us to be in order to be able to pour that blessing into us. And so even though it doesn't require technically anything on our part to receive that blessing, the promise to Abraham, to Isaac, and Jacob was unconditional. I will make a great nation out of you. But in order to do that, there had to be some preparation and changing of character. And God has to put it through the paces. And so Jacob does that. And then he's lame. But now he realizes that in that lameness, and this is where God says to Paul that when you are weak, I am strong, because in that I can show my glory. So Jacob is now limping, and he is limping before the most terrifying encounter he's going to have, which is his brother Esau, who's coming with 400 people. And all Jacob can remember is that Esau threatened to kill him 21 years ago because he stole the blessing from him. And yet when Jacob and Esau meet together, Esau runs and he embraces his brother and he kisses his neck. And so he has obviously forgiven him, and you see reconciliation. And I see that as a wonderful picture of a reconciliation that's going to happen between the Jews and the Arabs when Messiah returns. Wow. Of course, most of the world will perish in the coming tribulation. And then when Messiah returns, when Yeshua comes back, I mean, he's going to obliterate the enemies of God. But there will be many who will survive. There will probably end up being a couple of billion people who come through the tribulation period onto the other side into the millennial kingdom. Wow. And some of those are going to be Arabs. We look at in Isaiah chapter 19, and we see that there's a highway to God, and it's the Assyrians, it is the Egyptians, and Israel that make up the three nations that God calls precious to him. Israel being called his inheritance. So we see this picture of Jacob and Esau reconciling together, and it is a picture of what's going to happen between Jew and Arab when they all come to faith. And I think that's a pretty exciting time, and I think that's something to look forward to. The problem, though, and the problem that we have been dealing with for 4,000 years is that while before Esau had forgiven his brother, he had sowed bitterness and hatred into his descendants. And I'm sure when they were on their way to meet Jacob, a lot of his descendants were saying, oh boy, Uncle Jacob's going to get it now. And yet I think Esau probably shocked them in how he responded. And who knows whether that was planned or whether that was a spontaneous reaction. We don't know. But the bitterness that Esau, in his resentment toward Jacob, never left his family. And we're still fighting that battle 4,000 years later. So I think it's really instructive for us that even though we might have a change of heart, the words that we speak can never be taken back, and the effects of those words can never be changed. So that's what I got of the Torah portion.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Mark, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, what stood out to me, even with Joseph accepting his brothers back, and of course he had some conditions. There's a difference, I think, between putting out conditions for what I need from you if you're going to get this. I think there's a difference in that entity than unconditional love. Because I think Joseph still had, even though everything he put them through, unconditional love. But to restore back and to be able to do the things I want you to do, there are conditions. So we need to separate the two different things. And it's the same thing with God, God has an unconditional love for us and with us and us back. Yet there are conditions to our life with God and the blessings that follow. For instance, in Deuteronomy, in a couple of different places, and I didn't just look it up because I was listening to what you were saying, but we all know the heavy discourse. I think it's 31, where if you will do these things, then all will go well with you, or you'll be blessed. I don't like the word blessing and cursing in this discourse. I have never liked those words because our 20th century understanding of blessing and cursing is different than what it is in the Bible. And so to me, it's like, if you will do all of these things, all will go well with you. If you do these things, all will not go well with you. So those are what I was taught as directly proportionate. And there are several things. As a matter of fact, I did years ago, and I'd have to go dig out my research on this. But even in the New Testament, in the Brit Hadashah, there are countless numbers of places where there are directly proportionate. So in other words, if you do this, then this will happen. And that is, it's called directly proportionate. But the difference in unconditional love, for instance, I hesitate on this because I always hate to talk about this. My mother and father passed away 2 months apart, and then my sister passed 6 months after that. The only ones left in the family are my brother, who is 9 years older than me, and me. And my brother and I are we don't have anything to do with each other. There are no conditions on our relationship because there's no relationship. Yet if you boiled it down, I do know that somewhere within me, I have an unconditional love for my brother. And I know somewhere within him, though he'll never proclaim it, he has an unconditional love for me. As a matter of fact, if somebody in our family is, like our cousins, or I just had a cousin that died, and my brother got a hold of me and told me that, that he was dead, and I didn't know it by any other source. That's why I'm saying it's hard to, unconditional love is hard to explain, because I don't think there is any explaining to it, maybe. But there are conditions on our life is between relationships. I think any relationship that anybody has, whether it's friend or family, there are conditional things that have to happen. There are boundaries. Anytime you have boundaries within a relationship, friend or family, there's always going to be conditions in there. Yet still, I mean, like, Darryl and John are two of my most favorite people on the planet, and I have an unconditional love for both of them. But that within our relationship, there are boundaries and conditions. And I think sometimes people don't realize this. I think sometimes people mix up unconditional love with conditional love and the boundaries of a relationship. That's kind of where I would go with that.
Okay. Yeah, good. With what you're saying, Mark, and with Darryl, in that wrestling, the wrestling with Yahweh is something, and with Jacob, it's, of course, he gets his name changed during that wrestling, but there is something that, Darryl, you brought up, and it said where Jacob said, I'm not going to let you go unless you bless me. I will not let you go unless you bless me. And I just wonder sometimes, had he let the messenger go, and which I believe was Yahweh, Yeshua. I mean, you can say whatever, but nevertheless, he. What if he let him go? I mean, what if he actually let him go before he got blessed? What would have happened? And so that story is actually a theme that we can see even in our own lives, because do we give up too early sometimes when we're actually wrestling? The circumstances of life oftentimes are not necessarily us wrestling with the circumstance. Is it not maybe our wrestling with what God is allowing to happen within our lives? And in that wrestling, is that really an issue where the Father's trying to get a hold of our faith and trying to do something within us? And I'll give you an example. This is something that we learned a long time ago when we're praying for people that need breakthrough, or they need healing in their lives. And the tradition within congregations is that when we pray, we just pray one time. We go, okay, all right, let's go on. We'll pray for the next person. And a lot of times people don't get their breakthrough. But what we've learned is that if we would just stop, check, see what's going on, and pray some more, and stop and check. And sometimes we do that for a while. But when we continue to be persistent in the wrestling, so to speak, of that, we see the healing take place. We see that healing manifest then and there, because we took the time to wrestle. We took the time to pray it through. We took the time to stick with it. And it's like, Father, we're not letting go of this circumstance. We're not going to let this go unless you bless us, unless you bless this person, unless you take charge here and do something. This person needs relief. And when we've learned that, and I wonder how many times when we're walking through lives and we prayed and we're going to wait and see what happens. But sometimes maybe we need to take that prayer and go deeper and pray longer, pray through the night, fast and pray and praise God for the answer, but not let him go, because really what he's doing is he's trying to cause us not to let him go. And then so he can manifest his glory. He can manifest his goodness in our lives. Ultimately, we're changed when we get up on the other side. Darryl, you were wanting to say something on that?
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what has been going on with this whole transition down in Niagara Falls. And it has been a wrestling match, because God now the issue is that God has not been revealing to us all the details. And so we've been trying to kind of figure it out. And he has been opening things up as we go along. And, when we've got the pressure of our situation here, we know that there's a transition, but we couldn't figure out how it was going to happen. And he was requiring us to do things. I mean, one of the situations we dealt with is that I told God, I didn't want to have to depend on anybody else in Niagara Falls to make this move happen, because I know what happens in the leadership perspective when you start having to rely on other people. It never goes well, because people all of a sudden start taking liberties. There is this attitude that somehow you owe them now. Familiarity breeds contempt. You make yourself vulnerable. All that kind of stuff. It's true. And I've learned, over many years being in ministry, that it's safer not to make yourself too well known or too vulnerable to your congregants, because then there's no chance for them to take advantage of you. However, what we realized in this situation is that God specifically told us, make the need known to the people. And all of a sudden we had blowout down there. Like there were all kinds of people who were starting to make accusations. The main purpose in us going down this weekend was to have a meeting with a bunch of people and say, what on earth happened? But what was happening is that there was stuff that was lying beneath the surface, and God used our situation, our struggle, in order to reveal people's hearts and expose them. I can't stand having to be used that way because it's extremely aggravating, but God had to use our situation to expose people's hearts. Now, when we submit to the process, everything kind of worked out at the end, but there's still the wounding. There's still the limping. We have been, there were people who we thought who were in our corner who ended up betraying us in all of this. And that's very painful.
Yes.
And yet this is part of what ministry is all about. And it's that wrestling and, have we wanted to walk away? I can't tell you the number of times I've wanted to walk away from ministry over the past couple of years because it's been hard. And, we've reached the point where it's just like, we can't take this anymore. And God says, no, you got to keep pushing through. You got to trust me. You got to hang on until I bless you. And we know that there's a huge blessing that's coming. I mean, I've got a ministry that's erupting over in Kenya right now. We have been promised a harvest down in Niagara Falls, but getting down there is always hard. And, no matter how many times I preach about it, you still go back to how difficult it is to wrap your head around the fact that with many tribulations will we enter the kingdom of God. And many are the afflictions of many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord will deliver us through them. Yes. That doesn't make it pleasant. And you sometimes end up on the other side, battled and bruised.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. And it just, that reminds me of one other thing before we move into the next segment. And that's where Yahweh, where it says here in verse 29 of chapter 32 of Genesis, then Yaakov or Jacob asked him and said, please tell me your name. But he said, why is it that you ask my name? And he blessed him there. And another way to say that is, don't you know my name? How many times when we wrestle, when we're going through those circumstances, really the questions comes in is, do we know his name? Because by his name, he reveals himself to us. And that's such a hard lesson because sometimes we have to relearn his name over and over and over and over again. But he who calls upon the name of Yahweh shall be delivered. So anyway, good portion there. Good information. Yeah. Well, let's jump into the next segment here. And this one, every week I'm like, there's so much information, so many current events that are out there. Which one do I go with? Well, this one I'm going with today is from the Hal Turner Radio show.com. And it's on the headlines right now. And it's regarding the PRO Act. Have you guys heard of the PRO Act? And this would give illegal workers more rights than Americans. So think about that. Let that sink in for a second. Let me give you some background, how the article is talking about. It says illegal immigrants who take jobs in the United States are not covered by union regulations or other protections under the Federal National Labor Relations Act. So that's the NLRA. This is not surprising, as American laws were not written to cover those who come to this country illegally. A proposed law currently under the consideration in the House of Representatives, considering who's in the House of Representatives now, would change this in drastic and unprecedented ways. So think about this. It's being considered. Will it pass now? No, they get it in the books so that if they can get a Senate and they can get a president that they can join together, it'll eventually get passed. So this is kind of where the scary thing is. It was originally raised back in 2009, by the way. David Williams at the Taxpayer Protection Alliance was first to raise awareness of the dangers of the Protecting the Right to Organize, or the PRO Act. Protecting the Right to Organize, or the PRO Act. Under current regulations, and that's a misnomer, by the way, don't be deceived. Under current regulations, workers seeking to unionize can use signed cards to demonstrate that a clear and commanding majority favor unionizing. At that point, an employer can either accept unionization or offer workers a secret ballot election. The latter can prevent, this is what's good about the current system, the latter can prevent coercion by unions and protect workers' voting privacy. Some workers who do not want to unionize will sign cards to give their fellow workers the opportunity to vote. Elections are overseen by the NLRB to ensure they are fair and free. The NLRA bans employers from interfering in collective bargaining. Workers who believe their collective bargaining rights have been interfered with can sue, and if they win, can receive damages and other awards. Illegal immigrants are not covered, and covering them has never been the intent of the NLRB. In 2009, pro-union Democrats introduced the Employee Free Choice Act, the EFCA, which, unlike what its name implies, would have done away with the secret ballot elections and declare open season for coercing workers into unionizing whether they wanted to or not. That radical bill failed even while the Democrats controlled Congress and the White House. The PRO Act, which is H.R. 2474, that is H.R. 2474, has been introduced with its proponents promise it's a scaled back approach to the EFCA, but it's actually worse than the EFCA. Not only does the PRO Act leave unionizers free to coerce workers, it would grant illegal workers protections not even afforded American workers. How, you ask? It would make illegal immigrants eligible. There we go. It'll make illegal immigrants eligible for the first time for back pay, consequential damages, and an additional amount 2 times the amount of the damages awarded. That's punitive damages, by the way. Illegal immigrants would also be able to sue the employer in federal court if the NLRB fails to award these remedies within 60 days. Current employers may fire any worker or any workers found to be in the country illegally. This is to protect our immigration law and American workers and deter illegal immigration. U.S. laws are not intended to cover people who violate our laws upon entering our sovereign country. The outrageous PRO Act also subjects owners and employers to civil penalties up to $100,000 for accusations by illegal workers. This puts them in the crosshairs for accusations of firing them over their union status rather than being in the country illegally. A partisan-controlled NLRB could use this provision of the PRO Act to destroy small business, with one ruling favoring an illegal worker who is never supposed to be covered by American labor laws in the first place. The bill's language is clear. And it goes on, no relief under this subsection will be denied on the basis that the employer is or was, during the time of relevant employee or during the back pay period, an unauthorized alien as defined in section 274A H3 of the Immigration and Nationality Act, or any other provision of federal law relating to the unlawful employment of aliens. So it's right there. The PRO Act guarantees unauthorized aliens the ability to weaponize American courts against American employers, and Democrats unanimously rejected an amendment that would have required unions to verify an employee's legal status before counting them as favoring a union election. So what does this bill do? Basically, that the Democrats are supporting it, and Republicans do not support it. We believe, here it says, Congress should defend citizens and not subject them to bogus civil suits by people whose first act on American soil is to violate our sovereignty. So some interesting things that are being proposed within this Democratic Congress, at least more specifically the House of Representatives. These are some things that are happening, and we should make our voice known so that this type of thing doesn't take place. I know, Darryl, you're up there in Canada. This doesn't really affect you. You probably have stuff in Canada that may even parallel what this bill is. But it's, again, it's an act of sovereignty. Every nation should act sovereignly regarding the protection of the rights of their citizens and their workers, as opposed and even protect the privacy of the workers to be able to vote without coercion or allowing bigger organizations that can muscle in and take control over individual lives. So these are some things that are actually it's happening right now. It's being considered. Can't say that it's on the board and it's going to pass, but it is actually it's about the attitude within Congress of how they would prefer others above their own citizens. And Mark, I'm going to go to you first. What are your thoughts about this bill, this how do they say it? The PRO Act.
Well, let's see. I was trying to look this up. The Statue of Liberty National Monument says, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore." I think it says it in itself. The one of the last things that you said kind of actually said it all, and I can't think of what it was now. There was a document that was said, and I can't remember what it is, but I think we need to just round them all up and send them to Canada and let Darryl deal with them.
Listen, Justin's already working on that. Don't worry about it.
Well, there you go. I've been working with him, and so I don't know, man. It's just another layer to me. It's just another layer on top of everything else. There's not much. I think I can say about it is that we want to welcome in the people that come in a rightful way, in an orderly fashion. Let everything be done decently and in order. Don't come in and the wrong way, and immediately you've broken a federal law just by coming in secretly, and then after you're in, then it's the United States now has to go through all the trouble of developing these laws to protect criminals. That's what goes into my mind, is that it's not just these people, but there are a lot of other people out there, even American citizens, that are criminals that have more laws protecting them than those of us who are not criminals. Yet still staying with the subject, illegal aliens have a tremendous amount of rights. I'd like to see somebody do a document research on what the difference is now legally for illegal aliens than it was 10 years ago or even 20 years ago. The difference between what they are allowed to do and what their rights are and what laws cover them. I think we would be appalled at all the different things that this is one of the things you're bringing forth out of the news, but how many other things are being done that we don't know about?
Right. Yeah, you're exactly right. And it really is about a wrestling. It's a wrestling that we deal with in our nations. Like how can these things even happen when we consider the Constitution, we consider the liberties by which we've been given here, and yet these liberties are being used against us. And Darryl, give us some insight, because up there in Canada, they say as Canada goes, we're like 5 years behind Canada, and there's a mindset in Canada that's there, that America is trying to adopt some of that mindset as well. And I don't even know how Trudeau could even be reelected other than ballot stuffing up there, but ballot box stuffing. How is it?
Trudeau gave $600 million last year to some selective media outlets in order to help them out. And, the CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, Toronto Star, which is a liberal rag, not fit for a canary cage. And So, I mean, all of this, and it goes back to what we were talking about with the HR 5 legislation and everything else. All of this is designed to destroy the fabric of society, to bring down the middle class, to enslave everybody, and then ultimately population elimination. So, I mean, we can get caught up in the nuances and the different this and that and the other thing, but I think this goes back to what I was speaking about on Shabbat with the message that society has gone insane and that people are actually promoting this. I mean, how is it that we got these people elected into Congress to begin with? And how long has Nancy Pelosi been in Congress? 115 years or something like that?
Forever, right.
Yeah. Jerry Nadler, same thing. You've got Maxine Waters. I mean, is she embalmed already? I'm not sure. But so, I mean, you've got, it's always been said that society gets the government it deserves. And sometimes God has mercy and sends in someone who they don't deserve. But the reality is that the values of society have been changed so radically that there was a poll that just came out, and I think I talked about this, not this past Shabbat, but the previous one, that 40% or 42% of Americans or young Americans actually think that socialism is a good idea.
Yeah.
How do we get to this point when you've got Venezuela just to the south of you? My wife comes from a communist country. And when she came over here and one of her friends was lauding the virtues of Marx and Engels, and she looked at her and was just like, are you on freaking crack? I just came out of that. Coupons, food lines, this is where it's headed. And a lot of these fools, even in Congress, don't understand that they're going to end up under the guillotines when all this goes. They're not going to be protected. Everybody who is for population control, everybody who is for the totalitarian society, somehow or another they have been conned into thinking that what's going to happen isn't going to involve them and they're going to be safe from that. So it's okay for everybody else to go through that, like AOC. She thinks that she's going to be one of the haves when communism comes in. So, legislation, it's moving forward. We know where we're all going. I don't think Trump really has the ability to affect change anymore. And the reason is because society doesn't want some of the things that he is talking about. There is such a concentrated effort to remove him, to take him down, and to bring back someone like Obama, to bring back, I mean, how many people are still touting the virtues of Hillary Clinton? That woman is a certified witch. She is a high-level witch. And many people know this. And if you put evil in place, how is it that you think that electing or putting someone in control over you that has evil intent is going to work out well for you? It is insanity. But this is where we're at, because God has given people over to a strong delusion.
Right.
So if you got all these yokels in university, and I'm telling you, the biggest scam in the United States right now is a university education. You will be put into debt for the rest of your life to get brainwashed into doing something that is counter to your best interest. How is it that all these people can think that inviting someone in who doesn't deserve it, who hasn't worked for it, whose values are contrary to yours, and you're going to fight for those people to come in while they take away your job, and then you sit there and bitch and whine about the fact that there's no jobs left? We've gone insane.
Yeah.
And I think, sadly, that Canadian and American society has reached the point of no return with this. I don't think there's any coming back.
I totally agree with that.
I don't care who God puts into power.
Yeah.
I mean, Donald Trump was the last hope that I think American had. And if they had rallied around him and they had put a stop to all this, but they don't want it. They want what these people are selling. So I don't know. I mean, I think, with all of this, you got to get to the point where you just don't bother getting upset anymore, because we know where this is going.
Right.
And sadly, most people aren't going to make it.
Yeah. Hey, I was going to ask you, in Canada, do you have an illegal immigrant problem?
They have a legal immigrant problem.
It's not as bad here because they have to get through the states to get up to our border.
Right.
True. We don't have so much of an illegal immigrant problem as we have a refugee problem, that Trudeau is bringing in Muslim refugees by the boatload. And I've even watched the fabric of, Peterborough is a small town of about 80,000 people. And yet you wouldn't believe the number of hijabs that I now see walking down the streets, because they're being drop shipped over here to change the fabric of society. Yeah. Now, from a gospel perspective, this is a wonderful opportunity to share the Lord with them. And we've actually got a Syrian guy here in town who is a fiery evangelist. This guy is wreaking havoc in the Muslim community. I love it.
Right.
However, we all know how that goes. He'll reach a few, but the idea is that they want to bring in the enemies to take down society. Yeah. And when I look at what happened at the NATO summit last week with Trudeau and Macron and Boris Johnson mocking Donald Trump, how do these guys think that's going to? Now Donald Trump's talking about trade sanctions against Canada and stuff like that. And Trump is notoriously thin-skinned. And if you tweak his nose, he's going to take out a bat. He's going to whack you with it. And this is what Trudeau doesn't understand, is that he's playing with the big boys and he still thinks he's drama class.
Yeah.
I want to remind everybody, Darryl's in Canada, and he does not necessarily represent the views and opinions of Lamb Radio, though, even though John and I agree. I put that out there,
It's interesting, but it is. And again, these are the struggles. This is the wrestling that we're dealing with. It's the circumstances of life that we are faced with. And it's really not a light matter. And I think what's happened to most of the body of Messiah within North America is, and you can see what happened in Europe. Europe's completely overrun, is that we believe the lie that we needed to keep our religion inside the four walls of a church building, and how dare we even take it outside? And now they want to make it illegal for us to take these things outside and actually discuss it. They don't want people of faith to be in Congress or in the Senate or in any type of representative position, because after all, it's just not progressive. And progressive is, by the way, the specific term for moving towards Marxism, communism, and all of that. So they want us to do that. These are things that we need to wrestle with, but we also need to be ready and willing to take action and pay attention to what's going on. So some good thoughts there. I appreciate that. We need to move on to the last portion or last segment of Let Us Reason Together this morning, which is the Brit Hadashah. And Mark, you've got that. Or wait, let me say, Mr. I Want My Money Back. You've got that portion today.
I want my money back, by the way. This just in from Reuters news service. There was a flight to Egypt. The Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Rise and take your child and mother and flee to Egypt and remain there till I tell you. For there's a ruler by the name of Herod who's about to search for the child and destroy him." Joseph took his child and mother, and they went to Egypt and remained there until the death of Herod, which was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. "Out of Egypt I called my son." I'll tell you, you read the story and it could literally be out of the headlines some way. I've often thought, and in the back of my mind, and probably will still do this when things kind of die down a little bit for me. I have some times I would love to take the New Testament, the whole Brit Hadashah, and put the four Gospels in a chronological order, and then rewrite it as a news report. And you look at this, and you got Herod being a king who's sent out word that he wants to kill all the male children in Bethlehem in a region who are 2 years old or under. I mean, it's like it could be literally a news report straight out of today's time when you're talking about different rulers and what they're doing and all this kind of stuff. Of course, nobody would actually put that out publicly that, I want all the male children 2 years old and younger killed. But still, what is different than today with our rulers of the nations, not just the United States, but the entire planet? What's different today than it was back in Yeshua's time, in Herod's time? Herod has the arrogance and the power to actually make this a public thing, to put it out there that, hey, I want all these children born, or all these children killed. And I mean, it's appalling, the things that we're hearing in the news and what we just finished talking about, that is public matters in our own news service around the world are quite appalling. But yet we look at New Testament times, and I guess the only thing I've had to say about this whole discourse, that's the what is it? It's Matthew 2:13 to 2:23, which is the Brit Hadashah portion for this week's Torah portion. It's just not that much different. I think that the people of those times, they had, we know that they had different powers, but they still had power. And I think a lot of people, it's what we were talking about earlier in even relationships, when there's boundaries and there's certain things that they can and can't do. But I think a lot of the rulers in today's time don't know those boundaries. They don't know what they can and can't do, and they pass those boundaries up. That's what I'm seeing out of this Brit Hadashah portion, is that of the rulers, the people that were in authority to make decisions and do things back in those days, are very similar to the same thing we were just talking about in presidents and rulers of other countries.
Yeah. Mark, one of the things that when you're bringing that up, I think about one of the headlines that is now starting to hit more frequently. If it's it may be in the alternative media. I'm not sure how much it's hitting the mainstream media at this point in time. It's just becoming more and more apparent. First time I ever heard about it was probably maybe even a year ago. And it's this whole aspect of what's called adrenochrome. Have y'all heard of adrenochrome? So adrenochrome is it's a product of the body that comes out of the pituitary gland. And when for example, this is what's happening when a child is put into a state of great fear, and the adrenochrome releases into the bloodstream. And what's happened is they slice the bottom of the feet of the child and drain the blood and drink the blood so that they can take that life source of the adrenochrome to give them a high that it basically gives them a life or a high or this drug effect, and that increases energy and stamina and all this type of thing. And they're taking our children to do this. And this is what's been coming out, is what happens in satanic circles, Luciferian circles, and where the child sacrifices come from, where even the harvesting of these pituitary glands during the time of what's called an abortion, but they keep the baby alive, and they are harvesting this for the adrenochrome to give these extra natural experiences to those who are willing to pay for it. It was actually several years ago, there was an article that was put out, and how if you would be willing to pay for it, that children were giving blood, by which you can have the child's blood injected into your bloodstream for longevity of life. It's coming from the same type of thought of like, what child is giving blood for somebody that's an elite to put? I mean, it's very expensive. I mean, thousands of dollars to get a pint of a child's blood, and they're using this for life longevity. But it's kind of the same type of thing. The destruction of our children, or the using of our children, ultimately leading to their destruction, is the same type of spirit that was during the time of Herod and the time of Yeshua.
I want my money back.
You want money? It's not what I paid for. Darryl, what are your thoughts on this and this type of spirit that's in our age today that was during the time of Yeshua?
Nothing new under the sun. It's the same old. I mean, the devil flourishes more on child sacrifice than anything else, because I think that is the one thing that angers God above anything else. When you take an innocent life that is completely helpless and you sacrifice it for, I mean, ultimately it's for personal gain. And that's a scary thing. And
same story, different date. Same story, different date.
But now this stuff is hitting mainstream. This information is coming out. It's becoming more and more knowledge about it is coming out. And which, you know, when you think about it, this thing was conceived in Herod's heart. Mm-hmm. And then it had to advance. And then it led to the slaughtering of any child under the age of 2 in Bethlehem. And but it always conceives an idea, it's hidden, and then, you know, here come the enforcers to enforce that law, and the next thing you know is we have a slaughter that's before us. And, you know, maybe what happened in 1972, 1973, Roe versus Wade, and the passing of that, the legalization of abortion in the United States, so to speak, where it never became a law, it just was passed by the Supreme Court, for the slaughtering of the babies. Was there a greater intent than saying it was for the convenience of the mother, or the life of the mother, or whatever, to slaughter the unborn? You know, where have we come, and how has this thing advanced, where the life of the children, now it's not whether they're in the womb or not, it's the life of the children are being used by those that have power over them to be used and abused within our nation. You know, Mark, or go ahead, Darryl.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the same spirit with, you know, pedophilia. Pedophilia isn't done primarily because there's actually a sexual attraction to children. It's because they get sexual energy from the children. And when you corrupt a child like that, the demonic entities that are possessing these people get more powerful. And so when you've got this systematic stuff going on within the Catholic Church, it's not because, well, you know, priests should be allowed to be married and that will solve the problem. No, that's not the source of what's going on here. And so, you know, even when people try to explain why this is all happening, you don't really get to the core of it. And this stuff is taboo to speak about, even primarily within Christian circles. You talk to most believers about this, and they're going to look at you like you're completely out of your mind.
That's
because
fact.
it's that evil. It is that perverse. It is that contrary to everything about God. And instead of confronting the problem, specifically praying about it, preaching about it, I mean, how many people actually preach about this stuff? We're just burying our heads in the sand and allowing the enemy to trample over us.
Very true. Very true. You're very, very true. But there are some churches, there are some synagogues, there are few and very far between. But hey, how do we know? We're not in every church, that's out there. We don't know, but we know that there are so few people that do know about this. Just ask anybody off the corner.
I talk to pastors about this stuff, and they look at me like I've got a tentacle coming out of my head.
Yeah. Well, and I'll even say this, even within our own Hebrew Messianic community here in Amarillo, these are some things that we talk about at Life of Worship. I mean, it's just like, people be aware. We need to understand from a biblical perspective, how do we respond? How do we live through these days and these hours like this? And be aware of what's going. And there are people that have come out and said, we don't want to hear about that stuff. We just want to study the Torah.
Yeah.
I know.
And I'm like, isn't the Torah about applying it? Isn't that what the Agadah is all about? The inspiration from the Torah and how to live in the days we're living in? And
so those of you that don't want to hear, hi, Sandi. Those of you that don't want to hear about all of this kind of stuff, then we'll wave at you as they're hauling you away. Is pretty basically what it is. As they load you into the military trucks, because you didn't prepare and you didn't know anything about it, we'll wave at you and as you go by.
Yeah. And it's very important that we continue talking about these things while we have the opportunity. Changes are happening to YouTube right now where they're gonna determine who they think is viable on their network and all of that. And we've got challenges. We're on YouTube, we're on Facebook here on the Messianic Lamb Network. We have challenges set before us that we still need to continue and speak these things and get the word out and let people know, even if we feel like no one's listening. And I think, I just want to encourage everybody as we draw this to a close, is that this is important stuff, and post it on your social media, wherever your social media is. Put a link on there, let people know so they can listen into some of our discussions, because this is real world discussions from different points of view, and that we're things that we're facing, and then make this a discussion run in the circles that you run with on how do we respond. If we just simply, we must pray. If we don't have any action to our prayer, then don't pray. Honestly, in all reality, unless we actually put some action, we need to look in our communities, see what's happening with our communities, and can we be a voice? I've heard of one instance that because one person stood up and went down and spoke out, and this was in regards to the school system. I think it was Doug Hageman was talking about how he went down to the school system when he found out that his daughter is going to be subjected to some type of sex education where it wasn't just like biology. I mean, sex education in school is not about biology. It's about morals, and it's about their morals, not ours. And what they're teaching our kids all the way down to age 5 now is what the proposal is, and some schools are actually doing. And because he stood up when he got the letter from his parents that his daughter is going to have this type of class, he went down and spoke to the administration and said, no, you will not teach my daughter this, and this will not happen. This is not going to happen. We're not going to do this. We're not going there. And what happened is it changed the entire school's policy and program, and they did not bring that class for their students. One voice changed the school program. Yeah. And Because a lot of times we feel like we're powerless and that we're voiceless, but the power of God with the anointing on our voice can bring a change that goes beyond our own natural abilities. And we just need to understand who we are and who we serve, and understand, do we not know, like we said in the Torah portion earlier, do we not know his name? Well, why do you ask my name? Do you not know my name? And that's what's really, really important. And some really good stuff. Good discussion today. I really appreciate Mark and Darryl for y'all being on the show today and bringing your insight and thoughts. Of course, you can see I get riled up about certain things. But I want to encourage everybody, join with us next week. We'll be back next week, y'all willing, and we'll be talking about more of things that affect our lives today.
Bye, Sandy. We're praying for you. By the way, the show went just fine without you, by the way.
I'm glad because I was listening.
To let you know, we did okay without you.
Would have been better with her,
Yeah.
We would have gotten those expressions. Right. Yeah. Only Sandi can do certain expressions.
Well, we would have figured out the whole what's going on in a woman's soul thing had she been with us. We're still left in the dark about that.
Yeah, totally in the dark,
I guess we'll have to save that for another show, huh?
We solved it anyway. So.
Yeah, we did. And if you don't know what we're talking about, you got to rewind. Go back to the beginning. Okay.
There you go. Archives. That's right.
That's it.
Hey, love you guys.
All right. Well, hey.
Thank you.
So anyway, thank you all for joining, and everybody that's been listening. Thank you all for being part of the show today. And Mark, thanks for updating the music, the tag for us on this Monday edition. That's really appreciate that. So anyway, with that said, until next time, this has been John Craig, and we'll talk with you all soon.
There you have it.
No, we don't. He didn't hit in broadcast or the